Officially live here in the Weather Center. Good Friday evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, August 2nd, 2024. We are officially counting down as we ride the ascension towards the peak of the hurricane season, and it does not look like it is going to disappoint whatsoever. We have an abundance of information to talk to you guys about tonight. So right from the jump start, I want to more or less let you know what the schedule of events looks like for this live stream. I'm going to try to continue to keep it to about a 45-minute, maybe pushing an hour maximum, just so we can try to get through all the information, open the floor up for questions at the tail end of this discussion. We're not only going to talk PTC Four, forecasted future tropical storm, potentially Hurricane Debby on approach over the next 48 to 72 hours for the state of Florida, particularly the northwest coastline, anywhere between Apalachicola Bay all the way down as far south as Tampa, St. Petersburg, need to be on high alert, monitoring the forward progression of this system. We're also going to talk a couple of other entities because, to tell you the truth, PTC number 4, Future Debby, looks to be simply kicking off the month of August. All that coming at you right now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in this Friday night for our evening tropical discussion. I'm also going to more or less break down exactly what it is that I'm possibly going to be doing come very early Sunday morning as we look forward to a Debby intercept on the ground as we get ready to rock and roll into a potential Northwest Florida landfall. We're going to narrow that down. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I see the chat is alive and well. I have lots of you lovely viewers tuning in tonight. We're going to talk all about it. I'm going to try my best to answer any and all questions to the best of my ability. And with that being said, let's rock in here. Let's get started. Fasten your seatbelts, as we used to say last hurricane season, and let's get on in here. So this is Future Debby right here. This is PTC number 4, rapidly organizing. And when I say rapidly organizing, I don't mean rapidly intensifying. She is simply organizing. We're seeing a lot better and better of a structural setup to this system as we've gone through the day today. We went from a very dry wave approaching the Lesser Antilles to the north of the Greater Antilles, and now we have a bona fide, what looks to be borderline tropical depression at this point, to tell you the truth, with a low-level circulation that is clearly evident over open water just to the immediate south of central Cuba. So it is simmering over that 30, 31 degree Charlie surface temperatures out there. We're into very good ocean heat content, and we're wandering right into what's called the diurnal maximum for these tropical cyclones. And just to give you a crash course, when I say things like Dmax, Dmin, for example, during the day we have daytime heating that occurs. The sun hits the surface of the earth, whether it be water or land. As a result, we have rising motion and lower pressure across the spectrum. The thing with these tropical cyclones, which is why we tend to see this kind of flip-flop, for daytime thunderstorms over the inland areas, we want max heating of the day to kick off our rising motions, create those thunderstorm clouds, and then produce our severe weather. In this case, for tropical cyclones, since we have all that insulation from the cloud cover and all the increased moisture closest to its center of circulation, as the sun comes up, we don't get as substantial heating of the surface of the water beneath the cyclone because of all that cloud cover. Areas around it that are not submerged beneath the cloud cover associated with our system tend to experience a lot more of that surface heating, that daytime heating. Once the sun sets and we get a little bit of that diurnal cooling, that's when we can maximize the amount of rising motion or rising velocities upwards up into the atmosphere right around where that center of circulation is, because it kind of causes the opposite effect. It insulates that heat underneath the system, and that's where that latent heat exchange begins to occur. So if you ever hear other other meteorologists or other forecasters mentioning Dmax, Dmin, that's what they're talking about. So PTC number 4 is organizing, and I do anticipate we're going to see some decent advantage taken through our overnight time tonight, and we're going to have to watch exactly what this thing looks like when we wake up tomorrow morning. Between now and I want to say maybe middle of the day tomorrow, we are going to know exactly what to expect with this system. Unfortunately, we didn't really get as much in terms of recon data to plug into our models, plug into the forward progress of this system as I would have liked to have seen during our reconnaissance mission today. And I have a feeling a lot of it has to do with the government of Cuba not allowing our reconnaissance aircraft to travel fully through the system as we usually do with approaching tropical features. So that unfortunately kind of dropped the ball. We're kind of behind the curve in that department, but we're still rocking and rolling regardless. And then I also want us to once again turn our attention out to the main development region. We have this little buddy right here, this wave that continues to show very, very good signature convection occurring around its axes. Not incredibly organized, but moist enough to pose a potential threat as this system wanders through. I'm not going to show you the Happy Hour 18 Zulu GFS. I'm not going to show you that. If you want to look at it at your leisure, if you've already seen it, it's not good. I'm just going to put it that way. And our models are perking up to the potential for development with this feature as we go over the next 7 days. And again, like I said yesterday, I would not be surprised if we get a little 0 for 20 as this propagates through our windward islands and moves into the eastern and central Caribbean. And then back behind that, we have a whole mess of African easterly waves getting ready to rock and roll off the African coastline into the MDR just in time to hitch a ride on the MJO Boogaloo train, if you will, as some folks like to eloquently call it. So there's a lot of things that we need to pay attention to on top of PTC that's going to be bearing down on us here over the next 72 hours. Here's a close-up look of our true color visible satellite shot, and this thing has done phenomenal in terms of just tracking it real time today. You can see this is what's called a Lagrangian follow-up with this system, or a Lagrangian point of view, which means we're moving with the storm. This is perfect. Everything else is going to be a lot more stationary. It's like a geostationary satellite to where the system propagates through the satellite image. We're not actually following with it. In this case, we can actually go with the storm, kind of an overhead shot with it, which is beautiful in terms of identifying exactly where it's tracking, because there's been a lot of discrepancy between analysts and the way we've interpreted this low-level and mid-level cyclone. A lot of folks were thinking this thing was moving up. Let me use a better color before I lose you guys in the Terminator line there. A lot of folks were thinking this thing was going to move up like so and kind of stay over land through much of its time spent on the upper periphery of the Caribbean Sea, the Western Atlantic. We have kind of debunked that. If you guys look at the streamlining here, both the mid-cloud cover associated with the convection as well as our low-level features circulating around our broad vortex, you can make a solid case and you'd have a wonderful foot to stand on to suggest that our center is somewhere right in through here at the end of the satellite loop over open water where that convection is firing on its northwest quadrant. Right in through there, you can kind of see exactly how the winds translate. You have easterly flow here, you have due northerly flow here, you have westerly flow down here, and then you can see that transitioning to the north or the southerly flow to southeasterly flow on the east side of the system. So we are kind of wandering over open water, and this could possibly change the name of the game, because if it continues on its current course and it doesn't wobble towards the north and begin to interact with Cuba a little bit more, or God forbid it moves just a little further to the south and jogs towards this area of really gratuitous thunderstorm activity that's occurring in the southwest, that'll definitely put it in a prime slot for this thing to undergo additional development before it even crosses over into the Gulf of Mexico. And I do believe that we're not quite at that pivotal point in determining what Florida really looks like as we get into Sunday and especially Monday. That, right out of the jump start, to tell you guys, before we get any deeper into the brief, is that's the timetable we're looking at, anywhere between late Sunday night into very early Monday morning. This is not going to be a daytime event, unfortunately, for all of us. Unfortunate for the few of us who are planning on going out there and intercepting this thing on foot in vehicle, and for you guys out there who may be preparing for coastal impacts. We're not going to be able to see this thing with the daylight on our side. This is looking to be a nocturnal event anywhere after sunset on Sunday to the wee hours between maybe 2 to 4 a.m. on Monday. And as we all know, right now the sun tends to come up around 6:30. So the worst of the coastal impacts, wherever this thing may landfall, do intend on occurring sometime overnight. We won't be able to see it, and that also poses a risk for the preliminary tornado threat, preliminary flood threat, the preliminary surge threat before the actual center can make its way onshore. So just lots of moving pieces, and we're not quite there yet. I want to take this system, and I want to go from where we sit right now, somewhere just off the immediate coastline of Cuba, and put it here. And then we can really, really nail down exactly what's going to happen, because our waters are extensively hot. They are extremely hot. And I don't say that in the sense of trying to hype it up. I say that because we're sitting at 32 degrees Charlie off the west coast of Florida, and a lot of our higher res models want to take this thing right up the shelf waters along the west coast, and we've seen it plenty of different times. Right now we have a very good atmospheric setup aloft. We have a good anti-cyclone cyclone sitting right over top this area, or right atop this feature, which means it is breathing. We're seeing that optimal rising motion in the core of this storm to allow it to and exhale and take appropriate breaths as it races off towards the west-northwest. That anticyclone and those outflow channels on either quadrant of it, think of it like a compass rose, north, south, east, and west. That outflow is going to be diverging aloft in that anticyclonic fashion. You can already see it here on the true color. You can see all this cirrus blow-off flowing in a clockwise direction, pretty much on all sides of the system. Not as impressive on the south side just yet, but you can definitely see that clockwise. I keep wanting to say counterclockwise flow. You can see that clockwise anticyclonic outflow already occurring on the north side of the system. So if we can hold this structural integrity, if not look even better, as we go from here to its potential second landfall in Cuba and then emerge looking very much the same, then we're going to have a problem. I can definitely think that Category 1, our latest hurricane models are thinking Category 2 is a realistic threshold or a realistic ceiling with this system. This is our latest 8 p.m. advisory. Disturbance gradually becoming better organized while moving across Cuba. I'm not too sure if it is actually moving across Cuba. I think it has already done and finished up that mark, moving about west-northwest at 280, 290 degrees at 16 miles an hour. Pressure has dropped, I believe, 2 to 3 millibars since the last update, 1,010 millibars where we sit right now. These are our current watches, warnings, and advisories in effect. Tropical storm warnings have gone out for the southwest corner of Florida. Tropical storm watches and inland tropical storm watches are currently in effect. I personally am under a tropical storm watch here in Polk County, just to put it into perspective. And as this system gets closer, depending on how much wiggling and wobbling occurs to the west or the east, these watches and warnings will only expand further inland, because the state of Florida is relatively flat, so we're not going to have the terrain or the frictional influences to dispel the pressure gradient winds around this system. Moving right along, like I said, we're going to bombard you guys. This is going to be a fire hose type of event tonight here. We're talking 2 to 4 feet of storm surge up into the Tampa Bay area. That's not good. 2 to 4 feet of storm surge. Remember, storm surge is not ideal for Tampa Bay. They're very susceptible to flooding out there. I was out there for that one storm chase back at the beginning of January. I think it was December and then January as well. We saw where this, I showed you guys on live stream that seawall in the immediate Tampa Bay, downtown Tampa, is only maybe 2 to 4 feet before you actually get to the Gulf of Mexico. So if we see 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, which is just the general rising of the water, and then you factor into the equation the wraparound flow of the system pushing the waves, pushing the swell inland, this could definitely be a potential flood event for Tampa, St. Petersburg, and further up the coastline towards Cedar Key, which is where I'm thinking we're going to be posturing, not on the key itself, but just a little further to the inland portion of that general area. I can show you guys a map maybe tomorrow or on Sunday before we actually get out there, or just show you as we're moving in. I have yet to actually look at the tide timing. I need to look that up. I haven't done it yet just because obviously we're not sure what the intensity of this storm is. If it is a deepening system and getting stronger than what we're anticipating right now, storm surge is likely going to change. We're going to be on the right side of this system, so storm surge will be an issue. And just to once again give you a very brief crash course, storm surge is very different from waves and swells and rip currents and whatever else you want to put on the table in terms of your waves and all that and the tides. Storm surge is literally just the water being pulled up, almost like a gravitational pull due to the low pressure nature of the center of a cyclone. And it's literally a dome of water that follows the cyclone due to the immense low pressure and the physics involved at the center of circulation. And that's why you want to account for storm surge separate of your waves, of your wind, and overall the natural wind direction that could be pushing just a little bit more of that water to your inland location. So we definitely need to be aware of that. We saw large amounts of coastal flooding with Idalia, and Idalia was well off the coastline before making its final approach to the Big Bend area. It was a stronger system, but if you're picking up what I'm putting down, weaker system closer to the shoreline, stronger system further away from the shoreline, that kind of evens itself out. We kind of level ourselves out just a little bit. And then the flooding. Here is our flood potential. I do think this might be a little on the lesser side. This is probably taking into account that our stall does not look as likely over the northern portions of Florida. We have seen that solution more or less lose the possibility of occurring. We've seen the chances of that happening go down throughout the day today, since overnight yesterday into this evening now. So thankfully, it does not look like it could be as high of a ceiling for our overall quantitative rainfall totals. Not just talking about the storm itself, but the leftover moisture, if this thing were to stall and die out and rain itself out for all intents and purposes somewhere over the Sunshine State. You can see, however, we are not out of the realm of flooding, especially along the immediate west coastline. If you look at the color table off towards the right-hand side, we're still expecting anywhere between 4 to just under 12 inches of rainfall along the west coast, and even further inland, we're looking at anywhere between 2 to 6 inches, give or take the structuring of this system and how northwest, southeast, etc., or just symmetrical it is in nature. This is very broad, and we're already kind of getting a little bit of a moisture feed into the southeast, the Florida Keys, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Key West areas down in extreme southern Florida are already kind of seeing influence from this storm. If we come back towards the satellite here, you can see that the initial feeder bands are already starting to push into that general area. As a matter of fact, here over the next couple of hours, you're probably going to see some rain down there. If you live near Miami or even further to the south of Miami, you're probably going to get some of that classic feeder band activity as we rock into the early overnight hours of tonight and wake up tomorrow morning. You might still have some rain in effect for that general area. We'll have to see. Real quick plug, this is our other tropical wave. This tropical wave is starting to cause a little bit of ruckus on not only our ensembles and a few of our operational models. The European model keeps it as an open wave crashing into Central America, bringing up your rain chances for Belize, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, the same general areas we've been briefing pretty much throughout this hurricane season and the last hurricane season. Some of our other models, the UK model shows very subtle signs of development. The KMA shows a little bit of development possibilities. The GFS has suddenly fallen in love with this system and brings it into the Gulf of Mexico, as do a few of our ensemble members. So we're going to have to watch this and what's behind it very closely. I have this page pulled up because I want to see when it is we get all of our 0Z data. And I also have the weather models version of this pulled up as well, so we can see what our 0Z track guidance looks like. It hasn't populated in just yet, it looks like. Spoiler alert, that's what we're going to be talking about towards the back end of this briefing. But regardless, we don't have the 0Z in yet. Slowly but surely, our intensity models are trying to trend up. And you can see, all in all, we're in fairly good agreement that along the west coast of Florida, I know these are our 18Z track guidance models, but regardless, again, we're not really going to see massive shifts to the west. We're not going to see massive shifts to the east. Look at the timetable here. We're only 48 hours before we have a tropical cyclone knocking on our west coast door, trying to say hello and come on in for a brief visit, hopefully a brief visit. So we're not going to see massive fluctuations. Once again, even though we don't have the textbook defined consolidated low-level cyclone, we don't have a supposed vertically stacked barotropic warm core named storm, we don't have the recon data, all those fine variables aside, we're close enough in time now to where a lot of our model data will naturally have greater skill in their forecast guidance output because we're that close in time. We're not going to be 24 hours away from landfall and see it go from West Coast Florida all the way to Houston, Texas. That's just not the way the models work. We're close enough now to where we can see this coming and more or less get a better handle on extrapolating it forward once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. All right, so this is going to be the best part. We're going to go over some of our hurricane models because truthfully, after they've started to rerun for PTC Four as opposed to Invest 97L, we've seen a subtle uptick, and I don't want to start sounding the alarms on increasing the potential ceiling in terms of intensity for this system. I want to give it another 24 hours. Remember my key takeaway before you try to bombard me in the comments or light me up on social media. I want to give this thing another 18 to 24 hours before we truly lock in our forecast and alley-oop the key, or, free throw the key out into the wild blue yonder, to quote the Air Force song. We're not there yet. We're only seeing maybe 1-2 model runs of all of our high-res models increasing the potential strength of this feature. Concerning? Yes. Locked in? Not yet. Let's give it a little more time. This is our HAFS A model coming off of Cuba, already with a fairly pronounced low-level circulation. I do think this might be just a hair off towards the east, too far to the east. It looks like the model is trying trying to lock in on a lot of our feeder banding convection, whereas the center itself is actually somewhere down in this general area, which would line up with what we're seeing in the satellite imagery. It'll probably nudge itself a little further off towards the west before crossing over Cuba. That's also going to be pivotal in terms of what type of orientation we have in the low to mid levels of this system upon its working its way into the Gulf of Mexico. Remember, Cuba is fairly flat, but we do have a few mountainous areas on the Cuban island. Right here, as a matter of fact, where my cursor is, right around through here is where we have some very high mountainous peaks, and then off towards the western periphery of the island, we have very high terrain. So if it manages to run headfirst into either of these features, it'll probably be a little bit more sheared in the low levels upon its exit into the Gulf, as opposed to if it were to slip right in between the lower terrain features, go in between the valley area here, and really not experience a whole lot of that cheese grating effect to its lowest entirety or lowest threshold from the surface up to, we'll say, 850 millibars, 5,000 feet. So you take this through time, and you can see the model kind of corrects. We go from over the Keys, we correct very quickly and move west-northwest, and then we're down to 999 millibars already. You go a little further in time, 995. This is as we're starting the day on Sunday morning. This is about the time I'd probably be leaving my house. 5 o'clock Sunday morning. You go to 8 o'clock, and we're down to 997, approaching hurricane strength. This is mid to high-end tropical storm. You go forward into the evening hours. This is 5 p.m., 8 p.m. 988 millibars, and continuing to strengthen. We're seeing it continue to strengthen. You know, models sometimes don't have a very keen handle on rapid intensification, and we're already starting to see it deepen and amplify as it moves over those shelf waters, and it finally gets ready to make landfall as a 987 millibar hurricane, more than likely, at around 3 to 5 a.m. local time, just to the immediate south-southeast of where I believe Tallahassee is. Tallahassee is somewhere right in through here. So if you live from Apalachicola Bay, even if you're stationed or reside near the Tyndall Air Force Base area, all the way down to Cedar Key, this is where you need to be watching actively for the potential for a direct hit. And then down towards the south, a little bit further off towards the south from Tampa St. Pete up to about Cedar Key is our threshold. We just need to be continuing to monitor exactly how close it gets to you guys. I'm really not too sure we're going to see it wobble more towards the east. Our models have been course correcting throughout the day today, run to run, pushing it just a nudge further towards the west. If we come on over to our HWRF model, the HWRF model pretty much shows us the same thing. It crosses over Cuba, moving over the more lower terrain features of Cuba. Once again, it looks like we're catching the strongest thunderstorms here. Our low-level center actually looks like it's somewhere right in through here on this model, further to the west. So pay no attention to this isobar stamp. It looks like it's locked on to the intense thunderstorms wrapping up into its center. You go a couple timestamps forward, and you see we correct. We're now well off towards the west at 1,002 millibars. Go through time, right around 5 o'clock in the morning, we're almost off towards the west-southwest of Tampa, a little bit further away. 998 millibars, 996, 991. We're starting to really intensify and ramp up, and on its final approach, it deepens down to 983 millibars, coming up just to the immediate east of Apalachicola Bay. I do want to say that somewhere right in through here is going to be the greater Tallahassee area. This is Apalachicola Bay, Panama City, and then here's Cedar Key. Perry, Florida is right in through here. So all in all, this is our Big Bend area that could see the strongest effect from this system, down to 983 millibars, definitely approaching Category 2 intensity. We come on over to our HWRF that is just about all the way populated. HWRF takes it a little bit closer to the coastline. This is not something you want to see if you live in Sarasota, Venice Beach, Fort Myers, Charlotte Harbor, the St. Petersburg area, and Clearwater. You have a potential high-end tropical storm, if not approaching hurricane status, right offshore at 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So the HWRF is coming in a little bit faster. This is why we still need to give it a little bit more time for it to kind of adjust and kind of accommodate what it is that's going to happen once we get across Cuba. But again, echoing the same sentiments as our HWRF's A and B model, you can see, for some reason, I don't know if I agree with this. I think this might be a bit of a lag or some latency in our HWRF. The HWRF suddenly deepens it to 985 millibars at 18 Zulu. This is 2 p.m. on Sunday. You go forward 3 hours, 985. You go forward 3 hours, 985. You can see the pressure gradient here is getting stronger. So I want to say this will be an intensifying system on approach. And this is once again approaching that Category 2 threshold. Again, not forecasting or predicting a Category 2 coming ashore, but if we see this system hold its vertical extent, vertical stack, its overall symmetry, like we're starting to see it build now on the other side of Cuba, as it moves towards the north, we need to start speculating, adjusting our overall maximum threshold or maximum potential capacity this system could have. And all of our high-res models are thinking we can deepen into hurricane status. You switch over to the HMON. HMON is picking up exactly what all our other models are putting down. I'll scroll down so you guys can see. On approach, kind of mimicking a little bit more of what the HWRF is thinking here. This is 11 a.m. on Sunday off the shoreline of Tampa St. Pete. Coming up the coast down to 987, down to 983 to 985 upon landfall, just a smidge west of Cedar Key. Kind of looking at the Perry, Florida area once again at 11 p.m. Sunday night. Local time. This is 3Z on Monday, but this would be 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Florida. Once again, Cat 1, possibly Category 2 is what the threshold is as of our models right now. We're not going to lock that in yet. I want to wake up tomorrow morning and get the 0Z and the 06Z information in, and if we've backed off again, we're not certain. Confidence is still fairly low. If we have continued to see models stick around to this pressure value or, God forbid, strengthen, we got a problem. We have to know. We need to start rapidly adjusting our potential threats and accommodating for this fluctuation. Now here, we're actually close enough in time to where I just want to kind of go over what our high-res models are doing for the state of Florida. This is our RRFs, our RRFS model. We typically use this for convection and severe weather, but just want to give you a general idea of what the peninsula of Florida, all the way from the southern Florida Keys, all the way up to the Florida border of Georgia, just to kind of give you the rough estimate, the general idea of what's happening out there. So this is as we go through the day on Saturday. Conditions could potentially start going downhill for the southern extent of Florida. Start seeing some good onshore flow, anywhere winds between 15 to 25 miles an hour, just kind of getting a feel, a sense that the atmosphere is changing and you have something tropical coming into your area. You fast forward to Sunday, and then there's the center of circulation. The RRFs, even though this is a convective model, is right in line with what our HAFs, HWRF, and our HMON are thinking, so I wouldn't toss this out. Obviously, this is not the ideal model to be using. We're only using this as another tool in our arsenal, but we're just taking a look. We're just kind of getting an idea of what models are saying and if we have any good overlap and convergence and agreement, and we do. You can see off the coast of Tampa as we're starting the day Sunday morning. I would definitely encourage you take a very long look at the current conditions if you reside on the west coast of Florida, from down near Fort Myers, Sarasota, Charlotte Harbor, Punta Gorda, all the way up towards Cedar Key. If you're going to be going to church or going to run errands or going to a Sunday brunch with friends and family that morning, because we're going to have a tropical cyclone off our coastline, you can see right through Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area, you're looking at tropical storm force winds pushing ashore. And as we continue to go through time, we see that deepening trend, possibly into a low-end hurricane before it finally comes ashore or attempts to come ashore sometime very early morning hours of Monday. This is 2 a.m. in the morning on 5 August. This is Monday, extreme early Monday morning. Max sustained winds in the center of circulation, 72 miles an hour. So even the RRFs is kind of lining up fairly decently with what the HAFs A and B, HWRF and HMON are thinking. Same thing with the 3-kilometer NAM. You go through time, same general track trend, although this one does deepen it and rapidly intensify it a little bit quicker and crashes it right through the Tampa-St. Petersburg area as a hurricane. Obviously, on the table, possibility, probably not the likely outcome, but just something we need to be aware of, because our models are sniffing at something fairly strong pumping through this general area. And you can look, I'm even looking at, if this were a potential solution, Polk County, Haines City, Davenport, the Four Corners area, looking at tropical storm conditions if this thing does come crashing inland somewhere near Tampa, St. Petersburg. Definitely not what I'm thinking, what I'm speculating right now, but just giving you an overview, a general overview, more or less. Here is our wave height. So this is to supplement what we are thinking alongside our surge, okay? So The storm surge could be anywhere between 1 to 3, if not 2 to 5 feet. Okay, that's the rise in our water. We don't have to rise or grow the water far, we're very high. We don't have to see the waters rise very far to come above sea level for the state of Florida, especially for Tampa, the higher populated areas along our west coast. Florida is very flat. We are right at sea level. So even 1 to 2 feet of storm surge, you're already getting coastal flooding. You couple that with the wave heights here. We're looking at wave heights between 6 to 10 feet, maybe isolated instances with your stronger onshore flow of 10 to 12 feet. Combine that with the overall rise of the water, 2 to 4 feet. With swells higher than that, you're going to get coastal flooding. There will be flooding. So you need to be prepared for that. All along the west coast, regardless of intensity, there will be flooding. We just don't know the full extent yet because we are not fully dialed in terms of the intensity. And then just for fun, I wanted to show you guys this. Look at that. Look at that bad boy. That's what I meant by happy hour of the GFS. Looking at that wave in the Atlantic blowing up and not a pleasant time for our folks up there along the Gulf Coast. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on that feature for certain. And then finally, before we move into the question phase of this live stream, I also wanted to point this out. We are not done. Yes, just in time. Okay, so we do have the rest of the European model. Wow, this thing took its sweet time coming in. It literally just populated at the end or right in time for this briefing. We don't have our probabilities yet. That's okay. I want to take a look at the cyclone locations, and we're going to look at this together because this literally just populated. There are our ensembles for future Debby coming ashore as either a tropical storm or a low-end hurricane. That's neither here nor there. Look at the ensembles in the Caribbean for that feature that's coming through right now, and then take a look out there in the MDR. Wow, yeah, so we're going to have to watch. We are now in extreme monitor mode. Definitely extreme monitor mode. This is brand spanking new. I got to make sure to blast this into my tropical chat after this. I'm so glad that this finally came in. That's impressive. So we could possibly, it's obviously very far out, but that's a fairly healthy signal of something coming out of the Atlantic. This is how this system started. This is exactly how this system and barrel started. And we have a very hefty signal coming out of the MDR, moving to the north of our greater Antilles through the Leeward Islands and coming up through the Bahamas. That's pointed at the east coast of Florida. Did I hear 04 2.0? Who knows? Because that's exactly what happened in 2004, if you guys are familiar with Florida history. 2004, we had our west coast, followed by Francis on the east coast. Just putting that out there. I'm very glad that this loaded up because for a while now I was looking at these ensembles here. I'll take you in for a little bit of a closer look. We'll go to the Caribbean AOI and we'll look all the way to the end of the run. You can see there go our ensembles for Debby. I almost keep wanting to say Beryl. We have Debby right there. Then they go our few of our ensemble members. Not as excited for that wave this time around. I noticed the GFS gives it a little more love. And then you can see all these members right there coming in. Look at that. That's definitely worth watching in my book. Definitely very, very much so worth watching in my book. That's a nice signal in terms of strong members out there for the western, the southwestern Atlantic as we get to the middle parts of the month, and that lines up perfectly with when we will be fully in our optimized phase of the MJO and all of our moisture out there for the Atlantic. You take a look at our GEFSs, our 18Z GEFS ensembles, you can see a little bit more love for that wave going into the Caribbean and then into the Gulf of Mexico, and then there goes that next signal, the GFS kind of picking up on it as well. Let me go to the end of the loop. There we go. We have the end of the loop right there. GFS picking up on it as well. Look at that. Same thing for the southeast and the mid-Atlantic coast. I'm going to get a little animated here because we lost a lot of concurrent viewers. I don't know why. We don't have very many likes on this live stream. Folks, I'm not an amateur. I'm not an amateur. I'm a professional weather forecaster. I really am. Period. That's not me being cocky. That's not me gloating. I am not an armchair amateur who does this stuff for fun in my bedroom. That's not the case. I am a professional weather forecaster, aspiring meteorologist who is this close to his actual degree to be able to say I am a meteorologist. I've been doing this for 12 years now. I've been telling you guys since January, February, March, April, and there were a lot of folks out there that I had to just kind of take it on the chin. Hype, hype, hype. Florida, the Southeast, and the Mid-Atlantic need to be watching in August, and we are living it. We got a tropical cyclone coming at us in about 3 days. Following that, we have more and more signals coming up as we move through time into the middle of August. That's my mom's birthday right there, the 18th of August, right there, with a system possibly coming into the Southeast or the Mid-Atlantic coastline. So we need to be paying close attention to this. I had the pivotal weather ensembles pulled up because for a while there, like I said, the EPs were not loading on weathermodels.com. This is a bit of an awkward view, but you can see it a little bit better on here. You can see all of our little pieces there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 members moving in this general fashion out of the Atlantic just to the immediate north of our Greater Antilles. So the Lesser Antilles, our Greater Antilles friends, the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, everybody out there needs to be on watch as we move through the rest of August. The rest of August promises to be busy. Everybody out there trying to cancel the season and say that everybody's just being silly and having fun trying to make it sound as sensationalized as possible are going to have egg on their faces. They're definitely going to have egg on their faces. And I'm actually very, very thoroughly impressed by that signal we're getting out there in the MDR on our EPs. That is definitely concerning right there. Those are some strong members. And it's not like we have 2 or 3 of them. Remember, we have 51 ensemble members from the European model. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, plus our weaker members that are getting washed out or don't quite come together. You take 51 and we'll divide it by 12, you get about 5. So we have about, we'll say 15, 20% of our ensembles mentioning what could possibly happen here, right? Am I doing my math right? Math has not been my strong suit. I'll openly admit that for you guys. So yeah, we have about, we have 1/4 of our ensemble members, about 1/4 of our ensemble members bringing something else in the near distant future, 2 weeks from now, coming in towards the Southeast, towards the Bahamas, towards the Mid-Atlantic coastline. We're obviously going to see ebbing and flowing, but as we learned from last year and years beyond that, these systems tend to follow where it is we've had previous systems moving across. Last year was a wonderful example. I remember I had a very cringy video that I can't stand to look at the thumbnail that said pattern shift. Oh, and again, I had my weenie-isms back then during hurricane season, and I learned from it rapidly, as a matter of fact. And we saw all of our systems kind of following in rapid succession. In this case, we're kind of seeing the same thing. We're definitely seeing the same thing, and I will leave you guys with this before we open up the floor to questions and take a look if we have our 0Z guidance in just yet. It's coming. It's definitely coming. Here's our first Kelvin wave stirring the pot right now, moving across the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic between the dates of now through to August 13th, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Charlie. After that, we have a strong African standing wave and Indian Ocean monsoonal signal that will be continuing to pump out robust tropical waves. Very solid signal here. Very solid signal here as we go from August into September. So you can see it coming. We can definitely see it coming. This is that secondary signal right there that the EPs are perking up to, as well as the GFS. And then beyond that, we're probably not going to see a calming trend for a little while now. In fact, I honestly want to say we're getting very, very close to all hands on deck. Things are just going to continue to pop off. If you look here at the precipitable water, night and day difference as we go through the European model right there. Look at all these systems coming in. We have one wave right here. One wave right there, one wave right there, one wave right there. It's coming. It's definitely going to be working its way into the Atlantic. So we were in a very long hiatus. A lot of us were getting withdrawals, getting the addict scratching and itchiness and all that, and now it's finally starting to unfold. So let's take a look and see if we have our 0Z guidance, and you guys start dropping information in the chat. Try to keep it orderly, please. Don't spam me with, is this city going to get this? Is this city going to get that? Kind of look at the general geography of what we just briefed and put 2 and 2 together a little bit. I want to answer heavy hitter questions first in terms of what type of impacts, timing, could this do this, could this do that? I want to answer the heavy hitter curiosity questions first, as opposed to, what about this place? What about my zip code? What about my doorstep? What about X of a drive? You know, I want I want to start looking at the greater, the more curiosity questions, the more deeper thinking or deep thought questions, if that makes sense. Jason Richard, you're very right. That is very true. That is very true. I really appreciate that, Jason. Tommy, I'm not too sure what you mean by that question. In fact, I don't even know if I want to read it out loud. How much will we probably blank to get with the tropical storm? Can you explain what winds are doing or looking at in the Tampa area? So Skittles McDiddles, that is something we definitely need to focus on as we go through the day tomorrow. That's going to be a kicker for tomorrow. We need to see exactly what this feature does look like after it comes off of Cuba. Then we can get a better estimate of exactly what's going to happen as it gets ready to work its way towards our area. I'm surprised we don't have the 0Z data in yet. Very surprised that it's not in yet. It's 8:39, so we got to have something. Yeah, there's no 18Z data in just yet. What a shame. I thought we'd have it before ending the live stream. Mick and Marley, thank you very much for the $10 donation. TG Herman as well, thank you very much for that $20 donation. I really sincerely appreciate it. And Mike, as always, $5 donation for certain. For certain. And I know Mike has been struggling with all the weenie-isms out there in the weather sphere because there's been a lot of hype and sensationalism pointed at his general area in Louisiana. We're still keeping an eye on that general area, but I really don't think that there is any imminent threat right now. There really isn't. So we can backpedal off of the western and central Gulf of Mexico. This is a Florida event for sure. See, what other questions do we have? Could we see a stall somewhere supercharged? That is not out of the realm of possibility. It does seem like steering could still potentially collapse. We need to watch the amplitude of our trough as we go through the day tomorrow and when this thing finally starts to get picked up towards the north. It could stall near Florida. Some of our models do indicate it could stall somewhere between Georgia and South Carolina. Other meteorologists are saying the steering currents will be gone, so they won't all be gone. I can show you guys that right now as more questions are coming in. We'll take a look at the GFS right now since the GFS has completely lost the idea of it potentially stalling out. So we'll look at our 250 millibar level. There's the trough right there. That's our trough that could be potentially scooping this feature up. There comes our little weak shortwave trough that's going to help to deepen it. And this is our corridor right there. There's your path of least resistance in the upper levels, all that divergence and diffluence, creating a low-pressure corridor for this feature to try to escape as it moves up out of the Caribbean and into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. What ends up happening is we have this ridge building in and trying to propagate off towards the east, and it very quickly nudges it off towards the east, off of our spectrum here, off our east coast, and kills any kind of escape. It kills all of our height falls, all of our divergence, all of our lowering pressure, and that's why it kind of gets stuck down there. You can see it right here in this model run. It actually has it off the coast, feeding off of our Gulf Stream waters. It's stuck, and then it finally gets ready to lift up, and then, God forbid, there comes our next system bombing out and going full major hurricane status down to 954 millibars, full-fledged bona fide weenie run of the GFS moving into New Orleans. We need to watch that. Right now, that does not seem entirely plausible, but you just never know. Right now, Jason Richard, if I had to go and give you a forecast based off of what I have in front of me now, I would say for Fort Myers, all the way up to the Big Bend, starting down near the Keys, Fort Myers, Charlotte Harbor, and moving up towards the north and anywhere in between, we could see approaching tropical storm conditions, 40, 45 miles an hour at best. A lot of it is going to determine exactly how far to the east it moves and how far to the west it moves. Do you also track the MJO? Shane Castle, sir, welcome in. Thank you very much. And does that help enhance rainfall amounts with tropical systems? Absolutely, yes. Madden-Julian oscillation in of itself does not necessarily enhance tropical systems, but it does help to create a little bit more of that atmospheric instability that we want to see for these different little tropical wave features moving across the greater tropical spectrum. It gives them that extra little nudge to organize and rapidly intensify if they already are fairly organized. Typically, the MJO is like a large area of chimney propagations, or I guess in layman's terms, you just have all that rising air brought on by the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It's an area of moisture, area of thunderstorm activity that tends to flush the environment out of any kind of Saharan dust, subsidence, sinking air that may inhibit tropical development, helps give it that little stirring of the pot, if you will, and helps to amplify what kind of conditions we have in the tropics that make it a lot more favorable for tropical development. And you can track it. It typically moves at about a pace of, I think, 30 to 60 days. Sometimes a little faster than that, sometimes a little slower than that. How strong could the winds be in West Florida? Right now, we're not too sure. What we're forecasting is a high-end tropical storm on final approach, so it could be anywhere from tropical depression to low-end tropical storm impacts along the immediate coastline up until landfall. Amanda, thank you very much for the $10 donation. I do appreciate that. Really appreciate it. Will there be a window for rapid intensification? Paul, you know, it's definitely possible. It is definitely possible with these systems in a very, very favorable setup in the Gulf of Mexico. We've seen it many times before with approaching tropical systems, especially for the state of Florida. We tend to undersell the intensification before landfall. We tend to kind of undersell it. We saw it with Charlie, we saw it with Ian, we've seen it with other hurricanes through history that these things will tend to blow up on their final approach. Idalia was in the process of doing that. She just managed to work her way through an eye wall replacement cycle in a very ideal location for us in the Big Bend of Florida. Waters in the Everglades won't really have any effect because we would need the system to travel right over top, and I don't think we're going to see it moving across southern Florida. There is a possibility of rapid intensification. And remember, rapid intensification doesn't only encompass hurricanes or major hurricanes. We can have a tropical depression rapidly intensify to a high-end tropical storm. You just need the central pressure to drop, I believe, anywhere between... the actual specific number escapes me right now, to tell you the truth, but I believe it's anywhere between 10 to 15 millibars, if not just beyond that, over 24 hours to be considered a rapidly intensifying system. That's it. Mick and Marley, you're very welcome, of course. Have the steering patterns changed at all? No, Renee, they have not. And no worries, don't need to apologize. It's a good question. That's the type of questions I want to answer. I don't want to answer, is it coming down my road at this time? Look at the maps and kind of draw your own assumptions, and we're still a little far out to determine specific impacts to that kind of scope. In terms of recent storms, will this be analogous to the storm from November 2020 or even Idalia from those in Tampa Bay? It will, Carver, I would say so. I think we've got a very weird conglomeration of Idalia, Ian, Charlie, Michael, I dare say, and Irma on the table here. We have a weird conglomerate of all these different analogs, as well as Hurricane Elena and Tropical Storm Faye as well are very good analogs. There's a lot of them you could put on the table and come up with a general idea. Is that the storm that's supposed to hit Louisiana after Debby? Well, it's not supposed to hit, and we're not forecasting it to hit, Amanda. We still have a long way to go, and this is definitely the happy hour run of the GFS, wandering down the streets of downtown after a night out with the boys, kind of forecasting a major hurricane. Kevin, I wouldn't say be worried, but you should definitely be eyes wide open, buddy, out there in Puerto Rico. Like I said, if this is not a preliminary... Where did it go? I lost it. If this is not a preliminary idea as to what could potentially be happening out there, then I would say you're keeping your eyes closed for far too long. Look at these ensembles tracking right around that same general area. And again, I'm fairly impressed with this. This is not a very stagnant or a very, anemic signal. This is not an anemic signal, and it takes it right into this general area. So, Lord willing, we're not looking at another situation 20 years later to where Florida is just... It's been 20 years. I remember in Halloween 2018, it was 40 years from Michael Myers escaping in Haddonfield. 40 years to this day. It's very, very eerie to see that this is August 17th, and we may have something on either side of our coastlines or the mid-Atlantic. So lots to monitor throughout this month. It's going to be very, very busy. What route could the other waves take? Well, Roxanne, here you go. It looks like, again, like we've been advertising for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. They're going to be following this general route. this general route right there. We have a very dominant anticyclone in Bermuda High, nudging these systems off towards the west. We have really good easterly trade winds, and our easterly jet off of Africa is going to keep pushing these things all the way through the MDR, approaching the Lesser Antilles, and then from there we get a little bit of divergence. But typically, honestly, big difference in comparison to last year. Last year we had almost no Atlantic high pressure, and that's why we were looking at hype storms and fish storms for days. I agree. Where was that mess? I just lost it. Tyler Mack 954. GFS has actually done fairly decent this hurricane season, for sure. It really has. So Landfall looks like a Dahlia repeat. Tyler Mack, where we are so far, it kind of seems that way, but we have to give it another 24 hours. I want to give this another 24 hours before we really, really nail down what it is that we have what we have on the horizon. Robbie Lynn McCrary, no center yet, so we'll have to rebuild from scratch. That's why I won't intensify past Cat 1 unless it stalls. Hopefully, like I said again, I want to give this another 18 to 24 hours to plop itself into the eastern Gulf of Mexico and see what it does from there and what it looks like. Then we have a much better handle on extrapolating it forward and getting a better idea of what's going to happen for the final 24 hours. What is the difference between this storm and Ian? Vastly different, Jennifer. Vastly different storms. Ian became a thing down here in the Caribbean and worked its way up and around as a major hurricane. This feature, totally different, albeit we have enough resources for this feature to try to become something a little bit more menacing than a disorganized tropical storm. That is for certain, but very, very big difference. Very big difference. So, Amanda, once again, for New Orleans, I want to get away from that. I do. I want to get away from that because if there's anybody else watching this or anybody else looking at the happy hour runs of the GFS, they're going to start going crazy and causing panic, and I don't want that. We are still very, very, very far out. If you want me to really show you where we are, if you look, landfall is August 14th. It is only August 2nd. Let's not rush the timetable that quick. We've already flown through the first 7 months of the year. It is already August, came sneaking up on our back door. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go through the first tropical system for Florida, and then let's examine exactly how much reality these next batch of ensemble members have for the Gulf Coast, and particularly our island friends and the Southeast, the East Coast. Do you think Orlando will be under a tropical storm watch soon? Yes, I would think so. Shred shorts. Unless this thing trends further westward, that's the only reason I wouldn't see us under a tropical storm watch. I would definitely anticipate that being a thing. Still no 0Z data, and we're approaching 9 o'clock. Maybe it'll come in at 9 o'clock. Let's try to push another 9 minutes and see if we get any new data in at 9 o'clock. Once again, I'm surprised that... Wait! There we go. All right, so we have 0Z data. We have trended back towards the west. Looking at Cedar Key all the way towards Apalachicola. So just as we were briefing, the models have shifted a bit further towards the west. And I actually do think this is a very solid guidance. Look at where we have our center now. The center is offshore, so we have course corrected for 0Z. And we are picking up that this feature is over water and could move a little further towards the west. We're still going to have to watch it. Again, we need to see what happens here. So another 18 to 24 hours, once this thing is in the Gulf, moving in on our Florida Keys, Key West, we'll have a greater handle on what the final 24 hours of this system looks like before it really hits Florida. What does our intensity guidance look like? Kind of had a feeling it was going to do that. It has trended up just a little bit on approach. So you could see not exactly hurricane strength, but we're definitely moving up and up and up. We're seeing a bit of a hiking trend in our intensification before it makes landfall 48 to 60 hours from now. So tropical storm still seems like a realistic ceiling, but again, we got to watch this very closely. Definitely have to watch this extremely closely. We're too close for comfort, that's for certain. K. Thomas with the $5 donation. Thank you graciously for that. Liked and subscribed. This tip is for the Michael Myers reference. I love it. You're going to love this channel come October timeframe then. I'm just going to tell you that right now, K. Thomas. If you're still watching, my long-term viewers can testify to that. I have a lot of fun when it comes time for spooky season. Thank you so much. I've been waiting since Tuesday for your video, Latriva. Thank you very much for the kind words for sure. Naz, you called us when the season was first announced. I really did. I really did, Christine. You make a very valid point. It's spooky to see it verifying, but we did. We, as a community, we spoke about it, we speculated, we theorized, and we came to our best conclusion that August was going to be the month where Florida, the Southeast, and the Mid-Atlantic need to be paying attention, and we literally get a 2-for-1 deal. We have something coming towards Florida, and then it's going to move its way into the Mid-Atlantic, so everybody's getting it. Everybody's getting it. God, thank you for giving me the wisdom and the ability to do what I do for you guys. Tyler Mack, $5 donation. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. If there may be an increase in shear, that would be good, but that means more rain. Hey, there could be. I really don't think we're going to see our wind shear going up, though. We are just way too favorable down there. If I switch over to our Western Atlantic look and I show you the wind shear up there, we are just way too favorable. Look at that. We're crystal clear. There is no wind shear up there. We are sitting pretty. Like I said, we have an optimal environment. We have no wind shear out ahead of this system. You go over to our relative humidity, and we are very moist as well. Very moist for this system to deepen and intensify quickly. Even the GFS at this point in time is thinking that we could see a small bit of maybe, we'll say moderate intensification, not rapid intensification, but you can see it comes off at about 1,010 millibars and deepens down to 998 millibars in that 24-hour window it spends over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Those waters are extremely, extremely hot. That's the kicker here. That is definitely the kicker here. If you look at the Western Atlantic and you zoom in, look at those shelf waters. Even where we sit right now, we're getting into those 30-degree temperatures, 30 degrees Celsius. So we're really going to have to watch what this system does overnight tonight and see exactly what it looks like when we wake up tomorrow if it stays out over open water. Here's where we are right now. It is definitely out over open water. It is sitting right around here. Oh, dang it. I hate it when Tropical Tidbits does that. I really do. It throws everything out of whack. There you go. So if you track the center, it's right here. It's moving, it's moving, it's moving. And there goes that silly adjustment. So never mind. I hate it when... This is why I like the Lagrangian perspective a little bit better. I like to follow it so we can see where it's going. Let me refresh this so we get the latest satellite imagery. It's definitely getting that look, though. It is definitely getting that look. We have a really nice, somewhat broad, but attempting to consolidate low-level spin. In fact, I bet if we look at our actual vorticity right now, it's not doing too bad for itself. Do I have the vorticity saved here somewhere? Let me see. Before we get ready to close out the live stream. There we go. Yeah, look at that. We are definitely seeing the vorticity tightening up and increasing for certain. And we're definitely seeing it consolidating as well. It is pretty much right over top itself. 925 still reflecting a little bit over Cuba, but a lot of it is now over open water. You look at the wind shear, and out in front of it, we got no wind shear. Very good conditions. Very good conditions as this feature tracks off towards the west-northwest and then up into the Gulf of Mexico. Wind shear is not an issue. Dry air is not going to be a factor for you. So we definitely have to watch. I really hope it doesn't, Scott. I really hope it doesn't, but we are over open water now, so observations and upper air data that our models take in at 0 and 12 and each other adjacent model run will be pivotal in nailing down what the final 24 hours are looking like. Tyler Mack, I think I am. Yeah, I think Sunday morning we're going to hit the road early, and we're going to chase this thing starting near Tampa and then riding up the coastline from the 19 to the 9. There's another state road up there that I want to connect, but we're going to go I-4 west, then we're going to hit the 19 and continue up towards Cedar Key, further into the Big Bend area. So we will see. Saharan dust is diminishing, Kevin. Saharan dust is definitely diminishing. I believe I had somebody ask that in my comments section earlier today, as a matter of fact, and I made sure to write a response to you as well. But if you look across the Atlantic, the Saharan dust is diminishing. It is definitely not where it is definitely not where it once was. If you look, we get that plume right there, but it very quickly just gets washed out. Very quickly gets washed out. And for our MDR, for all intents and purposes, it's a non-issue. Fort Lauderdale is probably going to be seeing much of the same as the rest of the state of Florida. being on the East Coast, probably not as extensive, but you will have some blustery onshore flow, that's for certain, with intermittent showers and storms as this thing rotates around. That's for sure. So rip currents will definitely be an issue. We're going to have very good conditions for potential waterspout activity, as well as intermittent heavy periods of rainfall and some gusty onshore winds as this transitions through. But all right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap the live stream. It is 8:58. Thank you very much for everybody who tuned in this evening. If you haven't done so already, please nudge that like button. Give it a little extra love. Give it an extra bit of nudgeage so we can get this information out there to folks. I really appreciate all the wonderful questions. You guys have been a spectacular audience tonight. We still have another 48 hours before this thing begins to move inland. About another 24-ish hours before we hit the road and we look for our first on-foot in the trenches intercept with this feature, whatever it may bring. And we're going to try to bring you as much coverage as possible. Yes, Super Charas, for sure. Flood potential is definitely on the table, but we'll need to kind of keep an eye on where it tracks after landfall. That's the big thing. If it loops around and gets stuck underneath the stagnant air or upper air pattern, it's going to struggle. If it does kick up off the East Coast and then slow down, the flood potential is going to be a bigger issue for certain. Thank you guys very much. I do appreciate all the kind words, for sure. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you also for tuning in tonight. It's been a pleasure. And thank you very much for all the lovely donations, for sure. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again probably sometime tomorrow. I'm going to give you the heads up in advance since I'm going to be chasing on Sunday. I'm probably going to spend a lot of the day tomorrow still looking at the data, but I'm not going to jump on my first opportunity to live stream. We may do a very late evening live stream depending on what my whereabouts are, but I would like to spend some time with my family before we get ready for full intercept mode and we hit the road Sunday, and probably are traveling through much of the day on Sunday following this thing up our west coast. So definitely stay tuned for more updates. Follow me on my other social media platforms if you can, so you can get those hour by hour, easier to upload updates. And then I'm going to figure out exactly when we're going to do our final stream tomorrow here in the Weather Center and figure out what our chase mode looks like for Sunday into Monday. It's possible. Equipment YT, tornadoes in Fort Lauderdale, it's possible because those feeder bands moving around, interacting with the Gulf Stream could definitely see a little bit of isolated spin-ups within the stronger bouts of convection, for sure. But thank you all very much for watching. I will see you again very soon. We'll figure out what the stream looks like tomorrow. Like I said, I'm going to be out with the fam all day for the most part, so I'm going to try to step back from the weather sphere, but I'm going to keep watching, keep forecasting, keep theorizing, and I will update you guys as soon as I can. I'll make sure to get back to you regardless. I'm not going to just forget about you, but again, I'm going to take some family time and enjoy Saturday for what it is, especially if the weather cooperates before this feature starts to work its way in. Renee, thank you very much for the $5 donation. I sincerely appreciate it. It goes a long way, and it goes right back into this channel always. All the donations come full circle, like the circle of life, and just go right back into this community. So have a wonderful night, guys. Happy Friday. Happy early weekend. Happy first weekend of August. We'll see you again tomorrow. Be safe out there. Enjoy. And until next time, this is Weather Center. Whoop! Sorry. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, and I missed you in the live chat, please drop them in the comment section down below upon the ending of this live stream. Drop them in the comment section. I'll make it a point to get back to you regardless. Please nudge that like button once again if you haven't done so already, and please consider clicking subscribe if you're brand new to the channel or have been wandering in and out of these live streams and just kind of on the fence in terms of whether or not you wanted to subscribe. We're more than happy to take you on. We'd love to have you as a part of the Weather Center community because we have a lot of information that still needs to be relayed beyond Debby and beyond what the rest of August looks like for us out there in the tropics. Thank you all once again. Until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.